Imagine you're holding $100 bill in your hand right now. Not in theory, actually in your palm. You can feel its texture, its weight, the strange authority it carries despite being nothing more than ink on cotton paper. Most people look at that bill and see something inert, a static object, a dead unit of exchange that translates into a pair of shoes, a tank of gas, maybe dinner and drinks if you're disciplined. In their minds, money is something you spend, a consumable, a tool for converting time into temporary comfort. But if you understand the real physics of money, that $100 bill isn't a piece of paper at all. It's a living organism, and right now, it's decaying. Every single day you leave it sitting in a checking account, under a mattress, or mentally earmarked for someday, it quietly loses microscopic fragments of its future to inflation. Not dramatically, not loudly, but relentlessly. It's being eaten alive by time. And yet, inflation isn't the real tragedy. The real tragedy is what that bill could have become if you had treated it like a seed instead of a snack. Because money, left alone, doesn't just sit still. It either rots or it multiplies. There is no third state. And the difference between those two outcomes has almost nothing to do with how much you start with, and almost everything to do with when you start. This is where one of the most expensive lies in modern life sneaks in. You've heard it, even if no one ever said it directly. The lie says you need a war chest before you begin, that you need $10,000, a perfect credit score, a sophisticated strategy, a higher income, a cleaner life, a better version of yourself. Only then, it says, are you allowed to step onto the field. This lie has bankrupted more futures than bad investments ever could. Because in the cold mathematics of compounding, the amount of money you start with is almost irrelevant compared to the date you start deploying it. The true minimum isn't a dollar amount, it's a psychological threshold. The moment you stop seeing money as something you consume and start seeing it as something that reproduces. Once you cross that line, the trajectory of your entire life bends, quietly and permanently, in a new direction. Not overnight, not dramatically, but mathematically, which is far more dangerous. To understand why, we need to talk about how this machine actually works. You've seen the charts, everyone has, those smooth, elegant curves that creep along the bottom of the graph for years and then suddenly arc upward like a rocket ship escaping gravity. They're beautiful, they're motivating, and they're deeply misleading. Because those charts usually skip the most important part, the valley of disappointment. That long, silent stretch where you're doing everything right and nothing seems to be happening, where you're saving, investing, sacrificing, and your account balance barely moves, where the story feels fake, where it feels like everyone else is getting richer faster than you, where quitting feels not just tempting, but rational. Compounding, at its core, is simply money having children, and then those children having children, and then those grandchildren forming civilizations of their own. But the human brain did not evolve to understand exponential growth. We evolved to track predators, seasons, and whether the berries we ate last time made us sick. We think in straight lines. We believe that if we work twice as hard, we should get twice as much. That if we save twice as much, we should be twice as wealthy. But compounding doesn't care about your intuition. It runs on a different operating system entirely. Its formula is deceptively simple, where P is your principal, the money you put in, R is your rate of return, and T is time. Most people spend their entire financial lives obsessing over P and R. How can I earn more? How can I find better investments? How can I squeeze an extra 2% out of my returns? They grind for raises. They chase side hustles. They hunt hot stocks. They refresh charts like addicts refreshing notifications. Meanwhile, they ignore the only variable in that equation that actually behaves like a superweapon: time. Because time isn't additive, It's exponential. It doesn't stack, it compounds. Every extra year doesn't just add another layer to your wealth, it multiplies everything that came before it with increasing violence. The curve doesn't rise steadily, it detonates. Which means if you delay 5 years because you wanted to wait until you felt ready, you didn't just lose 5 years of growth, you amputated the most vertical, most valuable part of your curve 40 years in the future. You traded millions of dollars your older self would have lived on for the emotional comfort of not feeling silly about investing $50 a week in your 20s. You paid for dignity today with poverty tomorrow and called it maturity. Let me explain this way. Meet Eric and Lauren. Eric is 22. He doesn't love his job. He doesn't feel rich. He doesn't feel stable. He feels like most people in their early 20s, underpaid, unsure, and vaguely behind in life. But he does something boring and unsexy and almost invisible. He sets up an automatic transfer of $200 a month, roughly the cost of a few subscriptions, some takeout, and 2 nights out, into a low-cost index fund. Nothing fancy, no hot picks, no adrenaline, just consistency. He does this for exactly 10 years. Then, at 32, he stops completely, never adds another dollar for the rest of his life. His total out-of-pocket investment is $24,000. Lauren is more responsible, more polished. She enjoys her 20s. She travels, she upgrades her apartment, she waits until she feels ready. At 32, she finally starts investing. Same $200 a month, same index fund, same return. But she keeps going for 30 years straight, all the way until 62. Her total out-of-pocket investment is $72,000, triple Eric's. Now, here's where the universe stops being polite and starts being honest. At a modest 7% annual return, Eric, who only invested for 10 years, ends up with roughly $440,000 by retirement. Lauren, who invested 3 times as much money over 3 times as long, ends up with around $240,000. She worked harder, she sacrificed longer, she did everything right, and she still lost by nearly $200,000. Why? Because Eric didn't invest more money, he invested earlier. He didn't win because of discipline, he won because of chronology. He let time do the heavy lifting while he was still eating ramen and wondering what he was doing with his life. Lauren spent 30 years trying to catch a ghost she could never reach because she believed the lie that money mattered more than timing. She was sprinting on a treadmill that Eric had stepped off before she even tied her shoes. This is the uncomfortable truth no one likes to say out loud. Your first $10,000 is the hardest money you will ever make, and it will also be the most boring. In the beginning, compounding feels like an elaborate psychological prank. If you have $1,000 and manage to get an incredible 10% return, congratulations, you made $100. That doesn't change your life. It doesn't pay your rent. It barely covers groceries. It feels insulting. This is the invisibility phase, the stretch where the friction of saving feels enormous and the reward of investing feels microscopic. This is where almost everyone quits. They look at that $100 gain and decide the sacrifice isn't worth it. So they pull the money out, buy something shiny, and reset their clock to 0 again. What they don't realize is that they just murdered an entire forest while it was still a handful of seeds. Because there's a hidden mechanic in compounding no one warns you about, the crossover point. That moment, years down the line, when your money starts earning more in a single year than you are physically capable of saving from your job. When your portfolio quietly outpaces your labor. When your past decisions begin paying you more than your present effort. But to reach that point, you have to survive a decade of looking stupid, a decade of tiny gains, a decade of friends outperforming you in lifestyle while you outperform them in trajectory. You have to be okay owning an account that feels like it's doing nothing for a very long time. Most people aren't built for that kind of silence. They need dopamine. They need motion. They need proof. So they chase crypto moonshots, meme stocks, get-rich-quick schemes, anything that promises a shortcut around boredom. But compounding doesn't work like a ladder, it works like a tree. You can't make it grow faster by yelling at it. You can't threaten it. You can't check the soil every 10 minutes and expect fruit. You plant it, you water it, you wait, and then one day, without warning, it shades your entire life. This is where the real minimum becomes even harder to see because it's buried under something far more socially accepted, lifestyle creep. This is the phenomenon where your standard of living rises in perfect lockstep with your income. You earn more, so you spend more. Better apartment, better car, better clothes, better dinners, better vacations. The result? Your gap, the space between what you earn and what you spend, stays at exactly zero, whether you make $40,000 or $400,000. You feel richer, but you aren't wealthier. You're just consuming at a higher altitude. Wealth is not what you earn. It's the portion of your life you don't have to trade away. It's the part of your future that has been prepaid. And the only way to build it is to defend that gap with religious intensity. You have to be the person who earns 6 figures and lives like they earn half. You have to be okay with your peers looking at your 5-year-old phone, your modest apartment, your boring car, and assuming you're struggling. They interpret lack of consumption as lack of success, but in reality, your lack of consumption is the sound of your compounding engine reaching takeoff velocity. You are trading the temporary appearance of status for the permanent actuality of freedom. In a consumer-driven society, that is a revolutionary act. Now, you might be thinking, this all sounds great in theory, but it's 2026. Rent is insane. Groceries feel like luxury items. Everything costs more and pays less. I don't have spare money lying around waiting to be invested. Fair, honest, real. But here's the part no one tells you. The real minimum that changes everything is simply the smallest amount you can afford to stop noticing. Not $10,000, not $1,000, not even $100. If you can automate $10 a week, the price of a couple coffees, you have started the machine. And the dollar amount is irrelevant because the real transformation isn't happening in your account. It's happening in your identity. The moment that money starts moving without your consent, the moment it leaves your checking account and enters a system designed to grow, something inside you rewires. You stop seeing yourself as a consumer and start seeing yourself as an owner. And ownership changes everything. Once you own even a fractional share of a global index fund, you are a part owner of the most productive companies on Earth. You're no longer just reacting to the economy, you're participating in it. You're no longer only exposed to inflation, you're partially insulated from it. You're no longer just selling your time, you're renting out your capital. And then something even stranger happens. Your perception of money mutates. You stop seeing a $50 dinner as $50. You see it as $800 of future freedom. You stop seeing a $600 car payment as a necessity and start seeing it as a $1 million hole in your retirement. Every purchase becomes a negotiation between your present self and your future self. And for the first time, your future self actually has a lawyer. This is why starting small isn't weak, it's lethal. Because once the habit exists, scaling it becomes trivial. It's easier to increase an automatic investment from $10 to $50 than it is to start at $50 from zero. Momentum beats motivation every time. The first dollar isn't about returns, it's about orientation. It's about turning your life toward compounding instead of consumption. The moment you start, even with a single dollar, you have fundamentally altered your relationship with time and gravity. You are no longer a tenant in your own life. Now, zoom out. We are living through an era of monetary instability, rising costs, eroding pensions, and social safety nets that look more like decorative fences than actual protection. The old path, work for 40 years, retire on a pension, fade gently into old age, is gone. It didn't retire, it collapsed. In this new reality, your ability to compound is not a wealth-building strategy, it's a survival strategy. If you aren't compounding, you're effectively paying rent to a system designed to extract your time and energy until you have nothing left to sell. The exponent is the only escape hatch. It's the only thing strong enough to counteract inflation, stagnation, and the slow erosion of purchasing power. It's the only way to buy back your Tuesdays, your Wednesdays, your ability to walk away from environments that drain your spirit, your ability to say no without fear. And the machine doesn't care about your background. It doesn't care about your trauma. It doesn't care about your intentions, your excuses, your circumstances, or your self-talk. It cares about exactly one thing: when you turned it on. That's it. The $100 bill on the table can either give you a fleeting dopamine hit today, a meal, a gadget, a distraction, or it can become the first brick in a fortress that protects you for the rest of your life. Most people choose the dopamine, not because they're stupid, but because the future feels abstract and the present feels loud. They tell themselves they'll start later, when things are easier, when they make more, when life calms down, never realizing that every day they wait, the mountain gets steeper, the air gets thinner, and the exponent keeps compounding without them. The ticking you hear isn't a clock, it's your future evaporating. So the real question isn't, how much do I need to start? The real question is, how many more days of compound growth am I willing to burn because I thought my minimum wasn't big enough?